Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today will be part 3 of our interview with Josephine Andrews, Supreme Secretary for Job's Daughters International and past Grand Guardian for Job's Daughters International in Washington.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
So today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have our usual group of hosts. We have David Colbeth, who's a member of King Solomon Lodge number 60 in Auburn, Washington. Craig Graham from Kalamalka 160 in Vernon, BC. Stephen Chung from Prince Charles 153 in Kelowna, BC. And I'm Matt Appel. I'm in Mill Creek 243 up in Montlake Terrace, Washington. And we have with us again our esteemed guest, Josephine Andrews. Thank you for enduring yet another episode with us. We appreciate you being here. And before we start it up again, David sent something, and it's something I've wondered more than once myself. So I will steal his question and say, I understand that at the Bethel level, the honored queen is sort of the head girl, if you will, of the Bethel. At the grand level, there's also Miss Job's Daughters Washington. I'm sure I got that title wrong. What's up with that? I guess is my question.
That's the best way to say it. I love the question, Matt, and it's an important distinction between the two. So we are not intending to have two representatives doing exactly the same thing. It's a big job in Washington. We're a big jurisdiction in Job's Daughters, especially in the United States. We're probably the second, maybe third largest jurisdiction in the United States. California ranks one, I'm fairly certain. In each jurisdiction, the Miss and the Grand Bethel Honor Queen can serve different purposes than in Washington. So I want to start off by saying my commentary will be specific to Washington. There can be great similarities in other jurisdictions, but each create their own manual of rules and regulations around both a Grand Bethel and around a Miss program. So the Grand Bethel Honor Queen in Washington is selected from past honor queens who have served at their Bethel or local level for a term, are not yet a majority member. In some jurisdictions, they can be majority members, but in Washington, they're still between the ages of 15 and not yet 20 years old, and have put forward a letter of intent saying they desire to be Grand Bethel Honor Queen. So it's very specific. And then at our annual session in June, they are put into a hat, if you will, and a name is selected to be the next Grand Bethel Honored Queen. For Miss Washington, Job's daughter, you have to be at least 16 years old, so they tend to be a hair older than the Grand Bethel Honored Queen could be, and not yet 20 years old as well. And that daughter's role is to be the representative of Job's Daughters in Washington outside of Job's Daughters. So the Grand Bethel Honor Queen is running, managing, facilitating things inside of Washington, connecting with the young ladies across the state, honored queens, Bethel members, visiting hopefully every Bethel while she's in term of office, and spending time with those girls, participating in, we just got home this morning from Grand Bethel Reception, where all of the Grand Bethel officers and representatives were honored for the afternoon, and we had a tea party and all kinds of good stuff there. She would have been on the committee as the Grand Bethel Honor Queen. She'd be on Grand Bethel committee as well, and help decide and function and determine what exactly would happen at the Grand Bethel level. She'll also run the meetings at our Grand Bethel convention called Grand Session in June, and be really that point person within the organization. Miss Washington would go to Grand Lodge and speak on behalf of Job's Daughters, and may also include the Grand Bethel Honor Queen in those remarks, or the Grand Bethel Honor Queen could also be asked, but the primary speaker would usually, for Job's Daughters in Washington, be the Miss Washington, Job's daughter. She would go to Amaranth. She did back in March. She would go to Eastern Star, usually in June. They invite her to attend Rainbow Grand Assembly in July. She will also be speaking at DMLA Convention here next weekend in Pasco, and is really a part of that more jurisdictional outside of Job's Daughters. So she can also do some really interesting things, right? She can maybe show up to a Bethel's car show, like Tacoma Job's Daughters does. They have a car show, and she has they both each actually have a special award that they get to then pick the best car. She might be a participant in parades. She would show up if Bethel has invited her to a fun activity. Let's say they're doing a paint night or having a promotional event and handing out eggs for Easter at a local community center or something of those lines. She could be invited and be that voice to say, I understand Job's Daughters to be this way, and I want to share it with you and why it's important to me, kind of like you've afforded me that opportunity. But that's really the difference. So Grandma Honor Queen's more internal, Miss Washington is more external, and Miss Washington comes with a much more extensive process for being selected. She does a test on her knowledge of Job's Daughters. She does an interview panel. She does a memory piece of work from the story of Job and does that and is scored on each of those areas. She sells ads for the session program for the Miss Washington pageant, and those sales determine how much the program has to be able to fund travel, projects, other things, and award scholarships to the participants in the Miss program. And then she goes on, after she is selected, she actually goes on to compete for Miss International Job's Daughters at the international session. That's held in usually July, sometimes August, but usually in July at this point, and competes on behalf of Washington Job's Daughters for that title as well.
You said something that intrigued me as a non-Job's Daughters understanding person. The Grand Bethel Honor Queen name you said is basically drawn out of a hat. Is that true for all the statewide girls' offices?
In Washington State, they are all selected from names that have been approved and submitted for the drawing. So the Grand Bethel Honor Queen is from girls who have also submitted a letter of intent and have met a couple of additional criteria. Grand Bethel officers are other past Honor Queens, maybe who aren't old enough or don't have a desire to fill that position. And those are filled from the rest of the drawing. And then we have a set of representatives that communicate and write letters, emails, follow along with what's happening in other jurisdictions around the world of Job's Daughters.
Interesting. Okay, so again,
the whole world, not just the United States.
Being a rainbow family, I guess in Rainbow, the top handful of girls are elected, and then the others are appointed by the head adult. So,
and that can be true for Job's Daughters in other jurisdictions. As I mentioned, the manual of rules and regulations are custom in each state.
Interesting. Huh.
I see that, just to tie into that, I see that the international that has a Miss as well as a Grand Supreme Bethel
Honor Queen.
Honor Queen. Is it a similar process? Do you know? Does Washington mimic the Supreme, or who chicken to the egg? Who came first? Did Washington initiate that idea kind of as well, or has the two role position always been there?
Okay, so it's going to be a tricky answer because it's two separate roles, so it's going to be kind of two separate answers. I believe Supreme Bethels started before Grand Bethels, and that is something that at the Supreme level current state, the Supreme Bethel Honored Queen candidates actually take a test and have to score a certain score or higher to then be eligible to be selected when the drawing starts. And that's the only office I'm thinking is true of that. The Senior Princess maybe, but I'm not actually certain, and I'll go ahead and say that's something I don't know for sure. Miss International definitely started before Miss Washington Job's Daughter. In Washington, we had 3 years where we had honorary misses, and then I believe it was 1991 or so. Missy Ikaluchi is her name now. She's a friend of mine in Idaho, lives now in Idaho. Was what we kind of consider in current state Miss Washington's the first current state style Miss Washington Job's Daughter. So we are celebrating somewhere around 4 years, I think, is this year, in Washington Job's Daughters. But Miss International did exist before that. The program for selecting a Miss International is very similar to how we do it for Miss Washington Job's Daughter. In this digital age, there are new nuances that make it different. So 2 years ago, I got to be on a Zoom call just like this and got to listen to girls do their memory work on a Zoom call and score that portion of the pageant. And they did it all on Zoom because we do have girls competing from countries all around the world. And that was a really great way to be more inclusive, to allow girls who are their Miss in their jurisdiction to then be able to compete for Miss International and not have to be present to be able to win, which is a really phenomenal change that Job's Daughters has made in recent years. In Washington, it's all present in person in Wenatchee.
That's incredible.
Oh, sorry.
Josephine, I wanted to ask you something, a little bit of a segue, but we're famous for that on this show. So your husband is a member of Frank S. Land Lodge.
Yes.
And Frank S. Land, of course, was kind of the man that organized Demolay, and he had very specific and very honorable reasons for doing that. What's the genesis story of Job's Daughters? And is there somebody that was at the center of it at the beginning who had a really clear vision of what was, what she or he felt was needed for young women?
Yeah, I think you'll love that Job's Daughters was primarily founded by a woman. We lovingly refer to her as Mother Mick. Her name is Ethel T. Weed Mick, and she is from Omaha, Nebraska area, and founded Job's Daughters in 1920. She, along with several other people, collaborated on what would Job's Daughters be, how would it be, and if you think back to the 1920s and the privileges women did or didn't have, there was a need for women to support young women growing up and provide an opportunity for change in the world. And it was her desire, I understand and believe, that she wanted something more for her girls. And banding together young women was an opportunity to do that, because then young women help build young women. And it's really been 105 years almost of young women building other young women and having adults there to help and support and supervise and encourage that along the way. So we tip our hat, if you will, proverbially, to Mother Mick, and we celebrate her birthday every year. So in Job's Daughters, if you're a member and active, you know who Mother Mick is, you know when her birthday is, and you know that we're going to celebrate her in March every year, which is when her birthday is. And some Bethels even go the extra mile. It is a requirement in that spring term, if you will, to celebrate Mother Mick with a special tribute or ceremony or something like that. And some Bethels go the extra mile and do it in the fall term as well. And I know my daughter's home Bethel is doing that this year and added it to the calendar and was told, you don't have to have it. She said, but I want to have it. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing, that the girls cherish the founder of the organization. I heard somewhere around the way recently that she'd be something like 145 years old now. Maybe it's even a little older than that, but we certainly value and cherish her. And there's a beautiful memorial at her graveside in Omaha that when we went there for our international session last year, we were able to visit and see it. And my daughter and I and my good friend Kristen Dykes and her daughter Sarah, the four of us got to Omaha early and actually went to the gravestone and spent our time cleaning it and washing it off and kind of just making it as pristine as we could in order for all of the visitors who are coming in. And there may have been a plan to do that anyway all along. I won't say that there wasn't, but when we got there early, we were like, there's a need for this. And I loved watching this next generation take the time and energy to focus on a woman who historically is very important to members of Job's Daughters.
Well, speaking of the next generation, I don't remember if it was on the previous segment or in what we call the Blue Room. There are in between the shows. You were talking gushing maybe even just a little bit about Elizabeth's I think, I was in the blue room because Steve said, hey, can we drag Elizabeth into the show? And you were saying that she's, of course, as a dutiful Job's daughter and a wonderful daughter to you. What is she doing? I'll let you talk about it. Or what was she doing?
Thanks for that setup, David. I appreciate it. My daughter Elizabeth, along with additional members across the jurisdiction, competed in March at our Job's Daughter weekend for being a part of the 5-person Messengers of Job, or Job's Daughters Messengers team, which we lovingly refer to in Washington as State Ritual Team. And the 5 of them work together to really crystallize and create uniformity in telling the story of the 5 messengers and Job's daughters, which is the story of Job's life from the Bible. And they go to the international session and compete. And on Sunday evenings, which is Sunday night right now for us, they get together and are on a Zoom call of their own, meeting to talk about parts and give each other feedback and input and nuanced information. Like, you said the word, but you said it a little bit different than I would have said it. What's the right pronunciation? You went a little fast. You went a little slow. That word should be a little softer. When Job says that word in that part, it means this. So could we adjust and talk through what the story means to them and how they want to tell that story as an entire team? And it's pretty exciting. They have 5 messengers, then they also have what's called 2 alternates. So if someone from the 5 messenger team isn't able to go, one of the alternates would take their place when competition comes. So if someone were to get sick, if someone had other plans and family things came up, whatever it might be, there's a solid plan in place for the totality of that team. So there's a total of 7 people this year. Of that team, we have girls from Spokane, Des Moines, North Seattle-ish area, Ballard is what it's really called, but I think of it as North-ish Seattle, as well as the Renton group. And they went and competed, memorized a part, and then were each assigned something to memorize. And I love that girls giving each other feedback in the way that I get to listen to them. Usually I'm kind of an ear outside the door. It's really a beautiful thing to be able to give someone feedback in a really genuine way and them to receive it and adjust. So Elizabeth was sharing with me recently that one of the girls said her part and was like very genuinely soft in the part, and they felt it needed to be a little bit firmer. And so the next weekend she came in and was really firm, and they're like, whoa, hold on, back that up a little bit, but in a safe space where they can give each other that feedback and that input. And in Washington, it's a big deal to be a part of State Ritual Team. This is a huge honor. And this team, last year's team, placed 2nd internationally, doing this competition at Supreme Session last year.
Wow.
And the year before, Elizabeth was also on the team, and that team placed 3rd internationally. So anyone can put together the math here, Matt, that 3, 2, they're hoping for first place, of course. But they're coming together, and regardless of what award they earn or do not earn, they've earned the sisterhood and the support system, and they will remember this for years to come, and it will be an important part of their growth and development overall. And I love that they also include the extra 2 girls as if they're part of the team as a messenger, right? So there's no difference to them and their attitude and how they treat one another in the practicing and being a team. The team is 7. 5 will get to do the final competition, but it is a team of 7. And that's important to me. And I think it speaks a lot about what Job's Daughters is teaching them, that the whole team is all of you. You're doing this together, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome that we talk about it on the show when we talk about ritual and other things, that it's more than just saying the words. You take the time to understand and to learn what they mean. And then the whole idea of the message opens up to that person, to the man and to the girl and the people. And so it's hard. It's like trying to take a corner off of a masterpiece and understand what the masterpiece looks like until you actually do it. But from the outside looking in, you can see how it's not just about, even the performance. It's not just about the words. It's about, like you said, the bond and the leadership that they develop and the cohesiveness and the understanding of each other and all these nuances and pieces that come together to be who they are and build them up. And so what a wonderful story.
Yeah, it's really, and this weekend, because we were great about the reception, one of the parents shared that her daughter was taking individual sentences from the part and asking, what does this mean? How would you say it? And it afforded her feedback of other definitions of some of the unique words that allowed her to see her part and the sentences in a different way, and maybe even add in a little bit of inflection in a way that was unique to how she's putting it forward. And
I love that.
And we take it very word for word. I'm memorizing the words, but memorizing and understanding the sentiment and the heart and desire behind the words is really what makes the difference, in my opinion.
I'm sure there's a great way that the ritual could be updated. Oh, wait. No.
Oh, wait. No, Matt.
Oh, we just did that, Matt. I don't know if I'm ready for another round of that.
You updated the ritual? Wait a minute. So
Matt's gonna join.
We have a rule that allows us to update the ritual every 10 years. And that got a little bit messed up during COVID times, but they had... at Supreme Session last year, all of the parts of the ritual presented for revision and voting. And we did it section by section, which was really phenomenal. But outside of that, which is amazing and has happened over the years, the big piece for me was the opportunity for the members of Job's Daughters to be voting delegates this last year. And that was the inaugural year, which is really quite outstanding. And Washington sent our 2 delegates, and they sat in the room the whole time with the adults, asking questions, being a part of the process, focused diligently. This wasn't about side trips and water parks and what you might consider the real fun of the fun stuff. This was the business stuff. And there was 2 girls who went and represented. One was 13 years old and the other was 19 years old. And I think that the fact that Washington selected 2 girls of quite a varying age, background, experiences in Job's Daughters is really quite phenomenal, and allowed for them to be their voice at the international session. And they did. They stepped to the microphone in front of hundreds of adults and other voting delegates, both online and in person, and talked about the parts and why things made sense and what they might like to see adjusted before it gets voted on, and really were a part of the process. And even before that, the Ritual Revision Committee had been working for ages on what would be adjusted, how would it be adjusted, how could we make it more relevant to today's youth, using words that are a little bit more familiar or
you're encouraging Matt. You goes.
I know it was pretty exciting, but I got to sit in the front and like watch the audience, and got to watch these girls, and got to watch them sort of do small group caucuses and conversations, and even step out into the hallway to have larger group conversations and come back and share their united voice. And it was a landmark session in that regard, and watching this process happen. So I'm looking forward to this continuing. It's in the bylaws now, and it will go on until something changes, but I don't see this coming out. I see it being developed if changed.
Very cool. I just by way of, for your information, I'm sure that our listeners are familiar with my ramblings, but I have been known to say that it might be time to update the language in the Masonic ritual as well. And I'm in the minority on this particular group. So,
yeah,
I've heard that as well.
Whenever you bring up ritual with Freemasons, you ask any 5 Freemasons about ritual, you're going to get 15 opinions. So,
yep.
And Steve and I come from a jurisdiction where it's there's 2 sort of very large ritualistic armed camps that very often don't agree with each other. So it gets interesting when we get into these conversations.
Well, in Canada, there's like 20 different rituals, so you can just choose one, right? Isn't there 4? Was there 4 officially? 4.
Yeah. 4 in British.
Here we go again.
Sorry, Josephine.
To get back to the topic, you said something 2 episodes ago that I wrote down in my notes that I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
That you were the Grand Guardian during / immediately after COVID, and that Job's Daughters in that time frame had been increasing in numbers in Washington. Is that correct?
Yeah, when we came out of COVID, I feel like society wanted things to do. And we saw positive growth in Washington Job's Daughters during the calendar year 2023, which half of that term was while I was Grand Guardian, and half of that term was while Michelle Daly, who followed me in the Grand Line, was Grand Guardian. And it was really awesome to see. And we did a lot of work while COVID was going on for how we would promote, how we would adjust the things that we were doing, tweaking, modifying, coming into the century with using Facebook and ads and other things, and really drove home the importance of how we have a good time, how we invite adults to volunteer and be a part of things, even if it's on a very small scale of, could you help put out refreshments after a meeting, all the way to being a part of Job's Daughters, the council members, and beehives. And all of those things, I believe, led to the success of being able to see in the annual report by International Job's Daughters International, positive growth in the state of Washington.
And was that pretty spread across all of Job's Daughters, or just Washington, or?
Different jurisdictions, different countries are at different points in their growth or changes. I couldn't say for sure for all other jurisdictions, but I do know for sure Washington represented growth. And wasn't the only state. We've also reinstituted, if you will, or brought Job's Daughters back to states in the last 2 years as well. And Florida, I think, is a great example. Went from 0 to, like, I'm going to ballpark 25 members. That may not be the exact number, but directionally, they grew from not having Bethels to having Bethels again. And when I was a girl, they had Bethels in Florida. So this is definitely a re-entry of Job's Daughters. And it's flourishing, in my perspective, in Florida. And recently, I want to say it was, actually, I know it was February 22nd, kind of a dates girl. February 22nd of this year, Georgia instituted a new Bethel as well. And it's really exciting to see the progress and growth that is happening for Job's Daughters. And I'm not saying it's happening everywhere in every jurisdiction in the same way, but there is wonderful stories about growth that I think are a wonderful, inspiring part of Job's Daughters today.
So your feeling then is you're optimistic. You're very
well. That's who I am. So yes, I tend to hold the card that says, there was probably a better purpose or a reason or logic behind whatever's happened. Everything happens for a reason might be something I say too frequently, even if it's something not so great. I believe that hindsight is 20/20, and there's usually a reason for whatever's happened. And I'm a very faithful person that way, that things do happen for a reason. So I tend to be pretty optimistic. But I'm also willing to put the energy behind making things happen. So maybe that lends to my optimism, that I'm willing to help be a part of the voice, the reason, and do the legwork to help make it happen.
Which is probably why they ended up giving you that title this year, and having that history, right, and that attitude.
I think we have some really amazing people at our international and local levels, but I'm going to focus for a second on our international level and say you cannot do that job without a heart of gold, because it's also going to take all your gold, to your point earlier, right? And I think that people like Jennifer Seelock, Brad Bingham, Katie Underwood, who's next in line, if you will, she's the vice, and Ken Bright, who's the vice associate, and those following them, they're in it for the right reasons. They want Job's Daughters to flourish. They want Job's Daughters and young women to have these opportunities. They themselves had these opportunities, or their daughters, for the gentlemen, are members or were members of Job's Daughters. And it's really important that we acknowledge that those are not easy volunteer jobs. These are of significant time, energy, and resources. And we need to respect and appreciate the work that they're doing and acknowledge that it's not always an easy job to do. I have great respect for these people. I would consider them my friends. And we're not always going to see eye to eye. That's not what friends are, right? Sometimes we challenge one another. And I would say that their heart and passion and intent is in the right place. It's a huge job. Huge job. No, thank you. Not really what I see for everyone, and I'm glad that these people have taken up that journey and path and are willing to do so.
Well, it sounds like a big job for a big organization that's doing great things. So I can't think of a better place to wrap this up. So thank you, Josephine, again for being on the show. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you
for allowing me to talk about Job's Daughters. Obviously, I love to, and I think it's a huge blessing to be a part of this organization in whichever way I can be.
And keep up your posts. It's so fun to watch your journey through life as well as through Job's Daughters, posting about your travels and your events and all those things that are happening. So thank you so much, and I appreciate our connection on a personal level. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate you making the time to spend with us to do these episodes.
My cheeks hurt. It's been a great time. I appreciate you guys having me.
Well, thank you. And on behalf of Craig and David and Stephen and myself, thank you all for listening to the Working Tools podcast. We look forward to hearing from you and talking to you soon. Goodbye.